Hello everybody and welcome back to the Dragon's Library. So today, I'm going to have a sort of double book review about the Midnight Kingdom and its predecessor, The City of Dusk. Both of them are dark fantasy epic books by Tara Sims. So, let's get right into this. So to get started, we're going to go over the City of Dusk. In the City of Dusk, there are 4 realms and 4 gods, life and death, light and dark. These realms, linked by magical gates, thrived for a time, until for unknown reasons, the gods sealed the portals. Now, 500 years after the sealing, the city of Nexus has been cut off from the other 3 realms, and the realm of Vitae is dying as a result. Crops fail, oceans dry up, and even the sun grows a bit dimmer with each day. To top it all off, a rebel group that practices forbidden conjuration magic threatens the city with catastrophe. As the realms come into alignment for the first time in a century, the heirs of the 4 noble houses, each descendants of a god, rush to save their city. Now, before we get started on my thoughts on the first book, let's go over the characters, because holy shit, there are a lot of characters. In the first book alone, there are at least 7 characters who we use for the POV, and there are at least 4 main ones who are POV characters. The first 4 are essentially the main heirs. You have Angelica, Nicholas, Tasia, and Risha. So let's go over them first. First up, we have Angelica Mova, specifically of House Mova. She is the descendant of Dea, the goddess of life. Basically, the Mordovas are the avatars of their magical world. Mages born in Vitae have the ability to manipulate the 4 elements: fire, earth, water, and air. Most of them can manipulate 1, a few can manipulate 2, a rare few can manipulate 3 that are like Grand Masters or Archmages. But only the Mordovas can manipulate all 4 at once. Basically Avatar rules, sort of. Angelica has been groomed to be an heir for a long time, and her family is one of the ones more violently fighting to be the replacement to the current king who has no heirs, at least officially. Next up is Nicholas Seer of House Seer. They are a descendant of Phos, the god of light. They are granted a light familiar that can change its shape, powers over light itself, the ability to move at superhuman speeds, that kind of thing, turn to a being of light, basically teleport. And also, when they are blessed in their temple, they gain the ability to grow wings of light and actually fly, for like full-on Angel or Aasimar style. However, Nicholas was not supposed to be heir even though he's older. His father had preferred his younger brother, but the younger brother died under mysterious circumstances, and he's seen as a disappointment ever since, especially when Phos refuses to light his wings and essentially magically endow him as his inheritance when he comes of age. So, family's ashamed of him, but he's trying to do his best. And he also has a strange relationship and friendship with the daughter of House Lestrider. They're the descendants of Nyx, the god of dark and night. And House Lestrider actually has several heirs. They have Dante, Tasia, and their younger sibling, whose name I forget at this moment. Tasia, though, is the one who's friends with Nicholas. Her older brother Dante is the more serious one. Tasia likes to run away from her responsibilities, and she quickly learns that that is not going to happen. After her brother Dante, who is one of our POV characters, though not one of the 4 heirs later on, he is eventually arrested for conjuration stuff, and so Tasia has to take over. She's not very good at political maneuvering, but she is really good in a fight, which comes in a lot more handy than you would have thought at first. She has the ability to manipulate shadows with her familiar, and also eventually gets a kick-ass sword that lets her throw shadows around and do all kinds of cool magic. Tasia is essentially the powerhouse of the group. She's probably the most dangerous one of them when it comes to raw strength when they're not being possessed. Finally, we have Risha. Risha is kind of the sensible, almost normal one despite being the necromancer. She is a part of House Vakara, and they are descendant of the god of the dead, Thana. Now, despite being, a necromancer, Risha is actually very against, just casually summoning dead things. She prefers to follow her family's rules and is very sticky when the others are constantly trying to justify everything they're doing. Risha is also the practical one of the group. At one point, she was willing to kill basically all of them if it meant protecting Vitae and the other realms. Although she does actually care about them, so just because she thinks it might be the best move doesn't always mean she'll do it. And as the series progresses, she realizes the cost that her kind of thinking has, even if it is the objectively right move, and she's not entirely willing to pay it all the time, which is a source of frustration for her. When you have this is what I should have done, but I didn't because I love people and I didn't want them to suffer. In addition to the 4 heirs and also Dante, we have Julian and Finn. Julian is, well, kind of a spoiler, but basically he's a member of a hunters. They hunt like monsters in the wilds, and he's called back to the capital to hunt down the conjuration mages underneath Nicholas. However, Julian also has a rare ability that no one really knows where the hell it came from. He tries to keep it secret. The hunters know about it, but they just have kept on the down low because it could be construed as like some forbidden magic. He can talk to monsters and beasts and even control them to an extent. As the series goes on, it's a minor spoiler, so I'm not going to tell you. However, I will say he becomes much more important, especially at the end of this first book and beginning of the Midnight Kingdom. Finally, we have Finn, who is also a massive spoiler. He's this guy who's originally introduced as a palace servant who hangs around Nicholas. He is a POV character throughout these books. I think he only gets 1 or 2 chapters in the first book, but he gets a lot more in the second. And that's all of our POV characters for the first and second book. Well, okay, the second adds like 2 more siblings and one of the gods, Foss, we actually get to see from his perspective a few times. But for the most part, they're kind of not very often the POV characters. And it's easier for me to simplify it like this, so I'm gonna go with it like there. And that really gets me to my main complaint about the books. These things are long, and I don't think it's because they absolutely needed the absurd page count. In fact, the first book is a really slow build-up. Now, this is used for world building and setting a mood, but someone needed to cut this down by like 50... No, I genuinely think you could cut out about 100 pages without issue. This is less of an issue in the Midnight Kingdom, but that's because since most of the characters are separated in different realms, Terra Sim had to be more conservative with their words, and each realm is essentially a separate group of people. So you're more of like reading multiple different actual side stories rather than one story with like 50 perspectives. Still, it's longer than it needs to be, and it doesn't have the same issue of the first one where they had a very slow build-up and you're putting the pieces together, but the individual characters are only getting part of the puzzle. However, I do think, despite all of this, that the books are worth a read. Like many books with a slow build-up, the climax can make it worth it. One of the things that made me a bit surprised is that no one person or group is actually responsible for the Machiavellian scheme in the first book. It's like 10 different factions, all with their own plans that just happen to be counting on God's Night for either political or magical reasons with the realms coming into alignment. It's actually really refreshing, and the payoff is a climactic battle that makes the reader feel like they're in a goddamn war zone. By the end, you have guards fighting with each other, and the houses, and the royal guards. The gods of life and death are trying to kill each other in the courtyard, until the god of light and shadow show up, and they basically join them by fighting in the sky. Each of them are possessing a different heir, not the heirs you were expecting for 3 of them. And that's not even countering the conjured reanimated corpses and another lady who's summoning a bunch of demons from a portal in the sky. It is pure chaos, and not the kind of thing most stories can do well. Usually there's a single big bad in charge, and they might manipulate a lot of groups, but it can come off across as unreasonable for one person to be responsible for so much. And in this one, it's not. However, by not doing that, the book is able to make the disaster of God's Night come across as not only insanely chaotic, but also kind of inevitable. At the point where the story begins, nothing the characters did could have stopped that destruction. Could they have made it better? Maybe less horrible? Stopped some of the people from being there? Maybe? But it becomes clear this is the result of men and gods plotting, and those plots go back centuries. It's very tragic, and I really have to praise Terra Sim for those last few chapters and the kind of dread they invoked. The City of Dusk came out last year, and if I had reviewed it then, it would have gotten a 7 out of 10. It has a very slow build-up and is overly long, but it makes up for it with pretty good world building. If it sounds like something you might like, then I suggest reading that before continuing with the video. Now this next part is my thoughts on the Midnight Kingdom, so there will be spoilers for the end of City of Dusk. You have been warned. Alright? Everyone who doesn't want those spoilers gone? Okay. After the events of the previous book, almost all the main characters have been scattered across the realms. Foss, still possessing Ryan, he's Nicholas's brother. You know, the one I said was dead? Yeah, he's still alive somehow. And managed to drag the Bone Palace, Finn, Julian, Nicholas, and Tasia into the Realm of Night. Rish has been stranded in Mortuary, the Realm of the Dead, with the soul of one of her friends from the Conjuration group she was trying to get to stand down. And Angelica and Dante remain in Vitae, trying to pick up the pieces of God's Night. Oh, and Dante's still a wanted person, and the king is dead, and all the royal family is gone, everything's in chaos. So, yeah. God's Night was a real clusterfuck. And we do get our first look at the 2 of the 4 realms, or rather, 5 realms. I warned you, there were spoilers. So, long story short, because I really don't want this to take up like the whole video. There were actually 5 realms and 5 gods. The 5th god, Orsis, was responsible for quintessence, which is a very generically named type of 5th magic that lets him speak reality into being and create portals. Phos and Dea grew jealous and were joined by Thana when they killed Orsis and destroyed Ostium in the process. And as Orsis' priests fell into the void, they became demons. Dea stole the corpse, which became the Bone Palace, and Phos ate what remained, giving him a taste for god flesh. Nyx was the only god who didn't betray their sibling, which had been hinted at before it was eventually revealed later on in the 6th book. It's a minor spoiler, but you already got the feeling Nyx was not as evil from the way he was allowing the vessel during God's Night to actively resist his control. And he was the only one to work with them when they were trying to stop the gods from fighting. Now though, Phos has the palace and people from each of the realms, which essentially is enough to give him sort of control over what remains of Ostium's power. Julian is actually a descendant of Ostium, which is where he got his whole beast speaking, and he gets other powers as the series goes on. Phos wants to use this power to kill the other gods and become the only one left. Meanwhile, Dea is pissed in Vitae and waging a proxy war on Angelica with another country. It's complicated. Finally, Risha has to escape the underworld before she dies because, not exactly conducive to life. Oh, by the way, the Realm of Night, Nyx's realm, is about to be destroyed by a supernova because we didn't have enough problems. So yeah, a lot's going on. One thing I have to give the Midnight Kingdom is that it isn't really wanting for a plot. There's not really a slow build up here. Things are slowed down in the midpoint, but there's stuff going on throughout this book. However, I will say I think the writing suffers a bit without the whole mystery angle. In City of Dusk, character of POV was swapped constantly, and this only gets more complicated when each character might be on a different plane of reality. I would read a chapter when I woke up one day, and then I'd get to the next one, and I had to flip back a few chapters to remember what that character was doing, because there are just so many characters, they're in so many different locations, there are so many names, and it's a little hard to keep track of not only where they are and what they're doing, but what each character individually knows. One moment that was really egregious for me was like, I was watching Tasia argue with Nyx. She refused to let him possess her to not fight Phos, and I was like, well, that's okay, but I thought we established Nyx was the good god who didn't betray Orsis. But it wasn't until later that I realized that was a conversation in Fox's head with Ryan, and I don't think any of the characters learn about that until way later on. Little things like that just confused me throughout the story. Maybe it's me for not paying enough attention, but it just felt like there were a lot of moving parts. Still, despite these issues, the Midnight Kingdom was a wild ride, and I haven't had experience quite like it before. I mean, we have a god of light invading the Kingdom of Night while Risha is attempting to escape the afterlife, and Angelica goes on a, trade agreement with another country only to deal with a coup and a pissed off god. It's pretty awesome. Tara Sims spends so much time thinking about the differences between these realms, like how Noctis grows a lot of mushrooms from the moon and starlight, and how it's weird to Noctans for them to imagine the sun and moon existing in the same reality and revolving in the sky. These different worlds also have distinct cultures, with Noctis having a distinct cultural significance on the stars, and where the stars in Vitae can't be used to predict the future, in Noctis they can, because it's a different reality with different rules. As well as Mortree is kind of a hellscape compared to the other realms, but it's also the underworld, and it shows how the gods seem so caught up in their fighting over Orsis' corpse that they have abandoned their own realms to decay. Dea is so obsessed with war that she allows her sun to grow dim and the crops to die. Thana is letting the kings of death run rampant, and Nyx is so weak from everything he doesn't have the power to prevent a looming catastrophe. Finally, you have Phos, who decided to launch an invasion of Noctis and steal the Bone Palace from Vitae while leaving his own realm to rot. In conclusion, I think both City of Dusk and its sequel, The Midnight Kingdom, are well worth a read. If you have the time for 500 and 600 pages respectively, and you can handle a slow build-up in City of Dusk, I think they're worth the effort. Now that's going to differ from person to person. Not everyone has the time for something that long. Even on Audible, if you're looking to listen to it, you're still looking at a 24-hour long audiobook each. And audiobooks, because they don't actually announce chapter changes as distinctly, I found, it can be even more confusing if you doze off for a second and suddenly a whole new character is talking. Like I said, I gave The City of Dusk a 7 out of 10. It was pretty good. Not amazing, but okay. And The Midnight Kingdom is a little better than that. I'd say it gets an 8 out of 10 overall. Good job, Terra Sim. And I'll keep an eye out for your third book. Maybe you'll get a 9 out of 10 on that one. So, yeah. Moving on to the outro, original plan was to have Baldur's Gate 3 and With the Golden Sword review next week. It's probably going to be the Ahsoka show and With the Golden Sword because I'm still working on the Baldur's Gate 3 review. Moving on to the out card, however, we have our subscribe orb. Click on it, go to my channel, subscribe. And there's also a playlist of all the stuff I've done this year and a video YouTube recommends. I have no idea what it is, but YouTube thinks you'll like it. So check those out, and I will see you all next time. Bye!